It's 5:31 tonight, August 24th, which is the advertised time and day for this meeting. So we'll bring this meeting to order. Introducing planning staff present tonight, Joella Thomas and Lila Osborne. All right, we'll do a roll call of members. Mike McLeod, Matt Steitzer present, Julie Jackshaw, Bart Riley, Josh O'Neill, Sean Ori, Bill Daly, Alice DeShay, and Mark Garf. Great. All right, Ms. Osborne, was this public hearing advertised?
Mr. Chairman, this subdivision actually is not a public hearing because it's a first minor subdivision.
Great, thank you for the correction. All right, so at this time we'll approve the minutes from May 11th meeting. If everyone has reviewed the minutes, is there any corrections to the minutes? All right, with that, we'll take a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you, Mr. Riley. Second? Second, all in favor? Aye. Great. All right, this is not a public meeting. All right, so the first item on the agenda is Sub-Pre 23-2, preliminary plat of the 4-7 Ranches Estate Minor Subdivision, an application for a 4-lot minor subdivision located north of North Ramsey Road. This time we'll take a presentation from staff. And real quickly, I appreciate the new staff report format. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought I'd rework the staff report to how other cities do them and make them a little more legible for the board and anybody else who wants to read the reports. So we just have one presentation tonight for the 4-7 Estates, 4-7 Ranch Estates minor subdivision, which is a 4-lot minor sub, and it has a remainder of 163.39 acres. The way the subdivision regs work is you can only leave a remainder, which is a tract that isn't surveyed and isn't given a new legal description, if it's over 160 acres. So really the subdivision today is just these 4 lots that are adjacent to North Ramsey Road. Here's the whole parcel. This is Ramsey down here, and I-90 goes along. The zoning, it's not zoned, but Ramsey's the nearest zoning to the southeast, sorry. Here's the plat. There's 4 lots, which are A1, A2, A3, and A4, and then this is the remainder, which isn't included in the subdivision. Just some pictures of the land. These are all taken on North Ramsey Road, so this is that road. And Iris Ridge Road goes, it cuts off of North Ramsey, and this is Iris Ridge going up here, and here's another picture of it. So the criteria to which we review subdivisions, the first one is effects on agriculture and agricultural waterways and water users. The surrounding land use is predominantly low-density residential housing interspersed with some grazing land. To the north are the Flint Creek Estates subdivision and the Vernon Heights No. 2 subdivision. To the west and south is I-90 and some more low-density residential. East is grazing land and residential. And this grazing land is already fenced. The proposed subdivision shouldn't impact livestock movement as it currently is. The second criteria is effects on local services. The Butte-Silver subdivision regulations intend for new lots to connect to public road, water, and sanitary sewer infrastructure when feasible, but there are no sewer or water utilities out here, so individual well and septics are proposed for each lot. The lots are over 20 acres each, so they'll be reviewed by Butte-Silver Health Department, and they must be approved before the subdivision would be approved. the final plat. Tonight we're just looking at the preliminary plat. Legal and physical access, which means that each parcel has access to a road that is either a public road or a private road with a public easement across it. All lots have access to North Ramsey Road, and these colors here indicate which parts of the road are private and which are public. So the yellow is owned by MDT. They maintain it. So there are 2 lots which access the public portion of North Ramsey Road. The red is the private portion. And so there are 2 lots that would access the private portion of North Ramsey Road, and that is covered by a public access easement. The school districts that would serve any new families on these lots would be Ramsey and Rocker Elementary, East Middle, and Butte High, and none of them have said that they do not have capacity. Effects on natural environment, wildlife, and wildlife habitat. All disturbed land besides driveways and new homes, building sites would be reclaimed and reseeded after construction. Fish, Wildlife, and Parks did comment on this subdivision. They noted that it's in an area of concern for weeds, particularly knapweed. There's known infestation around here. A weed management plan would be approved before final plat would be issued, and that's standard for all subdivisions. It's also a pronghorn migration corridor and seasonal range, so Fish, Wildlife, and Parks has recommended that any future fencing be wildlife friendly. Effects on public health and safety. The area is covered by the Butte Police and Fire Districts, but since it's a rural subdivision, there are a couple options that subdivisions have when they are rural for fire suppression, and one of these is in-home fire sprinklers to be required in any future house built on these lots, and that's what the subdividers decided to go with. So any new house built out here would have in-home fire sprinkler systems. All new approaches to the MDT portion of North Ramsey Road would need permits from MDT to connect. And all of the well, septic, and stormwater design will be approved by the Butte-Silver Health Department before a final plat would be approved. Wrapping it up, this board makes a recommendation to the Council of Commissioners, and this subdivision does satisfy zoning and subdivision requirements. So staff recommends approval with the conditions as outlined in the staff report, the standard ones that we typically apply to all subdivisions.
Thank you, Ms. Osborne. This time we'll take questions from the board. I have 2. One is a general one on your report. If it is the case that the board agrees with the recommendation, is it your intention that we can just read the recommended motion as laid out? Is that the intention of this new format?
Mr. Chairman, yes. I thought the recommended motion would make clear for any future questions of the board that the reason that you would recommend approval with the conditions outlined is because of the findings of fact, the information presented, and the application materials.
All right, great. That's super helpful. Thank you. So my question specific to the subdivision, the previous subdivision we reviewed, I believe, was a major, and in lieu of park funds, the staff recommended a trail. Is that not applicable here because this is a minor subdivision?
Mr. Chairman, that's exactly right. Only major subdivisions are subject to parkland requirements.
Great. Thank you. I have no other questions. Any questions from the board? Mr. Daly?
Is there no sidewalk or any curb and gutter? None of that is required either?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Daly, that's only in zoned areas. So because this land is not zoned, sidewalk, curb, and gutter is not a requirement.
Okay. Mr. Rory?
See, I hit that, but okay. All right, sorry about that. Are the owners of these lots and this land in general, are they doing this to sell these 4 lots for economic gain, or are they going to use it for, and I'm not sure it really matters, I'm just curious, are they doing this for themselves? They're going to build their own homes and family homes and whatnot on each parcel, or are they going to sell them? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ori, I don't recall, because it's just a standard subdivision, it's not a family conveyance, there would be no requirement for if they had to do one or the other, but I can't quite remember what they had said.
Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions from the board members? All right, I think we could, at this time, take a motion if everyone feels comfortable, as staff has outlined in the report. If anyone, I guess I could make a motion. Having reviewed and considered the application materials, finding of fact, and all information presented, I adopt the findings presented in the staff report for preliminary plat of the 4-7 Ranch Estates minor subdivision, and move to recommend approval of the application with the conditions as outlined in the staff report. All right, second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. All right, moving on to other business. Looks like we have an update on the zoning ordinance review. Ms. Osborne.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
That is a great background.
Thank you. I thought I'd have a little more fun than we usually do.
Are you saying we don't have fun?
You tell me. It's only a few slides, and I don't have much to update you with, but we just finished the audit. That should have come to all of you. Some of you gave us some great feedback, and thank you for that. The timeline hasn't changed too much, but a little bit. So June, we finished the audit. We're finalizing it, incorporating any edits and comments as you had. August, so now until January, we'll be drafting the new code, and I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. Every month between then, as we have planning board meetings, I'll bring an update to you. What chapters have we done? Do we need any feedback from you guys? Things like that. In January, we hope to have a complete draft, and that is what's coming to you guys. So we had decided before in previous meetings that because chapters are so interconnected, rather than reviewing it chapter by chapter, we would give you a draft, and then we'd iterate that. So in the first quarter of 2024, we hope to have that draft iterated. Stakeholder roundtables with the draft, so not only will you be giving us feedback, but the same stakeholders that we had in the beginning of the process will give us feedback. We'll have a public open house, so we'll have feedback from the general public. We'll go over those draft revisions, and then hopefully we'll finalize and adopt it with the council. So the way that drafting will work is the planning staff and Orion have bi-weekly meetings, and that's what we're going to do is go section by section. So they're going to propose some like a rewrite based on the audit, and then staff will review, will give feedback as we see fit, as the board sees fit. Definitions will be, we're not doing those section by section. That'll probably change as we go on because new definitions will probably arise. But the first sections that we're doing are the district purpose statements and tables of uses. So what districts are we going to have? What uses will we have? And then what districts will those uses fit within? I'm sure many districts will have the same uses. Some uses will be prohibited in certain districts, but that's where we're starting. And like I said, we're going to bring updates for what we've done, what we want feedback on every month when we see you guys. So that's about all I have for the update, but if you guys want to discuss any audit feedback, we absolutely can do that now. I know Mark, and I think maybe Matt had a similar question, who responds to the recommendations out of the audit? And yes, that is this board with planning staff. So you are the steering committee for the zoning update.
Any questions on the audit, or Mr. Daly?
So the last time that we talked about this, one of the big concerns was the impact of the legislative changes. Can you give us a kind of a summary of where we're at with that, and are they, or how we're going to incorporate that?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Daly. Yeah, so the dust is settling and we're understanding more and more what exactly the legislative outcomes are and how they're going to affect us. There are, for example, accessory dwelling units, which would be like a mother-in-law suite, a second smaller house on your same lot. That goes into effect January 1 of 2024, so that's something we'll definitely bake into all of our residential zones, because that provision applies to any zone that allows single-family homes. So, of the handful of land use change regulations that came out of the legislature, they'll all be put into the proper sections of code as we get to them, because we're doing it section by section. Maybe that, maybe saying single-family zoning is eliminated is harsh, but it technically was. You can now have 2 dwelling units on any lot that allows single-family homes. So there will not be any strictly single-family residential zones anymore as a result of the legislature. Parking minimums decreased. You used to have 1.5 spots per dwelling unit. If you had an apartment complex, each unit needed 1.5 parking spaces. Now you only need 1. These are just a couple details that I'm remembering. There's one, yeah?
On the first comment you made about the single family, how does that compare to other states?
There are states that have eliminated single-family zoning, and it was a big deal at the time, but Montana is not the first. Those are states that tend to be denser. Oregon, California, New York, maybe. There is a bill, I think it's Senate Bill 382, and it doesn't technically apply to Butte because we don't meet the minimum population threshold. And that bill gives a different path for communities to keep up with housing needs and other types of identified community needs. That means that you don't have to follow all of the smaller pieces of legislature like the ones that I just listed. And without remembering every detail of it, it means that every so many years you have to update your housing plan, your comprehensive plan, all of your background long-range planning documents, and then you have a list of tools that you have to pick from. And yeah, I think there's several tools, you have to pick X number of them, maybe 5 of them, and you have to employ those tools to make sure that you have the housing stock that your plans identified that you need, you have the business development potential that your plans identified that you need. So there would be a list of tools like eliminating single-family zoning, reducing parking, adding parking maximums, things like that, and you get to pick which ones best fit your community to make sure that you meet the goals of your comprehensive plans and housing plans and things. So while Butte's not required to participate in that Senate bill, we are thinking about opting in. You're allowed to opt in. So we have to make that decision, I guess, before we officially adopt the zoning code, because we're going one way or the other, right? I think that we're leaning towards Senate Bill 382, but there are definitely some things that we would need to get ourselves up to par in order to qualify to partake in Senate Bill 382. That was long-winded. I hope it made sense.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question about the enforcement, because that to me is the biggest concern. And I saw the section in there. I mean, do you think that this will be like moved out of your department where somebody will enforce this for you, or do you think the plan is to keep it all in planning and have an enforcement person? Or I couldn't really tell from the comments which way that you guys were leaning towards that, but I mean, that's the biggest issue we saw. People would go and do things and then it would be like, oh, well, fine me my $50 and I'll pay it and move on with life.
Mr. Chairman, Mrs. Jackshaw, great question. So currently we have a single code enforcement officer, and like you said, a lot of people do things and then accept their fine and then they move on with their lives. And we hope to give the ordinance a little bit more teeth. I don't know exactly how we're going to do that yet. Of course, we'll update you when we get to the enforcement section. Yeah, we have community enrichment and code enforcement have historically been, they work together really closely, but we technically only have one zoning code enforcement officer. And I don't know really how much that will change, because that's kind of a staffing and funding thing as well. But I hope that the ordinance would have more teeth in terms of ensuring that people do come into compliance.
I have just one more question. I'm not sure if this is where I would ask it, but I know that there's been a lot of discussion about VRBO properties. Where would I find that in this document, or would I find it in the document?
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Jackshaw, that is another really good question. Currently, and I don't know if you guys know this because it's a zoning board thing, but all short-term rentals, Airbnbs, VRBOs, are considered special uses when they're in residential zones. So if you live in an R1 zone and you want to rent out a house for a short-term rental, you go to the zoning board and you ask for a special permit. We have a lot that are operating without those special permits. We want to find a way to just incorporate them into the code. We don't know exactly how, though. I think we're probably going to rely on some best practice in other communities that have had similar issues to Butte with short-term rentals. I don't know any details about how exactly they'll be addressed, but we want to address them. And I don't think that we probably won't do the same process that we're doing now. Right now, they're pretty much enforced on a complaint basis. So as we get complaints, if a VRBO owner doesn't have a permit, we say, actually, this is the process that you need to go through to permit your short-term rental, and then that's how they usually get their permits.
I've seen some communities just cap it.
Mr. Daly?
What about long-term rentals?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Daly, so we don't technically have a definition for short and long-term right now. So there's that. I think we're best off defining what's short-term and what's long-term. If it's just long-term right now, we consider them just a typical residential use. Correct.
I just have one comment on when we get to the public outreach. I think maybe when we get to that point, I think what the public might hear is it kind of thinking of the hot button issues we've seen is probably solar farm and Loves. So I maybe just suggest staff to think about how to address that in these open houses, because I imagine that might be a question. So just a suggestion as we work toward those open houses. I realize that might not be really applicable in the zoning board ordinance update, but just something to be ready for. And if there's nothing else, we could adjourn. Great. All in favor? Motion adjourned. We are done.